She quit her job. Then her billionaire boss showed up at her door. For 7 years, Evelyn Park lived a life that barely felt like living. Every morning began the same way. Her alarm rang at 5:30 a.m., long before the sun rose over Seoul. The shrill sound cut through the quiet of her small apartment like a warning she could never escape. Evelyn never pressed snooze. She couldn't afford to. She sat up slowly, her body already aching from the day before. Her shoulders were stiff, her eyes heavy from the 4 or 5 hours of sleep she managed most nights. But she always pushed herself up. Because being late to work was not an option. Her apartment was barely large enough for a bed, a small kitchen counter, and a narrow desk covered with documents she had brought home from the office. The place felt more like a temporary stop than a home. Most nights she was too tired to notice. After a quick shower and instant coffee, Evelyn left the apartment just as the sky started turning gray. The streets of Seoul were already waking up. Convenience stores opened their doors. Street vendors prepared breakfast stalls. Commuters hurried toward subway stations with tired faces and quiet determination. Evelyn blended into the crowd like another invisible figure. By 7 a.m., she arrived at the towering glass building of Hanmin Global, one of South Korea's most successful technology companies. To most people, working there would have been a dream. To Evelyn, it was simply survival. 7 years earlier, she had joined the company as an entry-level operations assistant. She was young, ambitious, and hopeful that hard work would eventually lead to recognition. And for the first few years, she believed it would. She volunteered for difficult projects, stayed late to help her team, solved problems no one else wanted to handle. Her supervisors often praised her dedication. "You're reliable, Evelyn," they would say. But praise never turned into promotions. Instead, something else happened. Whenever a problem appeared, Evelyn became the solution. A scheduling crisis? Ask Evelyn. A client complaint? Let Evelyn handle it. A report that needed to be finished overnight? Evelyn can do it. Soon, the entire department depended on her quiet efficiency. But they also began to take it for granted. While others left the office at 6 in the evening, Evelyn remained behind under the glow of fluorescent lights, typing reports and fixing logistical problems that no one else wanted to deal with. Some nights she worked until midnight. Other nights until 2 in the morning. And every morning, she came back again. Her co-workers joked about her dedication. "You practically live here," one of them laughed once. Evelyn smiled politely. But inside, the comment stung. Because it was almost true. Her personal life had slowly disappeared. Friends stopped inviting her out after she declined too many dinners and weekend trips. Her last relationship had ended with a painful argument. "You care more about your job than about us," her boyfriend had said before walking away. Evelyn never tried to argue. Deep down, she knew he was right. The only reason she kept pushing herself so hard was because she had no choice. Her mother had been diagnosed with a chronic heart condition 3 years earlier. The hospital bills were overwhelming, and Evelyn was the only one who could pay them. Every paycheck she received was carefully divided between rent, medication, and groceries. There was rarely anything left. Still, Evelyn never complained. She believed that if she just worked hard enough, someone in the company would eventually notice. Maybe a promotion. Maybe a raise. Maybe even a simple thank you. But 7 years passed. And nothing changed. The most powerful person in the company, the billionaire founder Kim Do-Yoon, remained a distant legend. Most employees had never even seen him in person. He spent most of his time traveling between international offices and attending global conferences. Stories about him circulated around the building. They said he had built Hanmin Global from nothing into a billion-dollar empire before the age of 35. They said he was a genius strategist. Cold. Brilliant. Untouchable. Evelyn had only seen his photograph once on the company website. Tall. Sharp features. Calm but intimidating eyes. To her, he felt less like a real person and more like a powerful name printed on company documents. Someone who would never know she existed. Then came Thursday night. The office was almost empty. Most employees had already gone home hours earlier. Outside the large windows, rain poured down over the city, turning the streets into rivers of shimmering lights. Inside the quiet operations department, Evelyn sat alone at her desk. Her computer screen was filled with complicated logistics reports for an international shipment crisis that had appeared earlier that day. If the issue wasn't solved by morning, the company could lose millions. So Evelyn stayed. Like she always did. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, but her eyes felt heavy. Her head throbbed. Her shoulders burned with exhaustion. She had worked 16 hours already. Then something strange happened. Her vision blurred. The words on the screen began to swim together. Evelyn rubbed her eyes and tried to focus. But suddenly, her hands started trembling. Her breathing grew shallow. Her body had reached its limit. Without warning, Evelyn leaned forward and collapsed against her desk. The room spun quietly around her. For several long seconds, she simply sat there, staring at the glowing screen. Not crying. Not panicking. Just empty. 7 years. 7 years of sacrifices. 7 years of exhaustion. 7 years of being invisible. And in that moment, something inside Evelyn finally broke. Slowly, she straightened in her chair. Her trembling fingers moved to the keyboard again. But this time, she didn't open another report. She opened her email. Her heart pounded as she typed a new message. To Human Resources. Subject, Resignation. She stared at the blank message box for a long time. Her mind whispered 1,000 doubts. What about the bills? What about her mother? What about the future? But another voice inside her spoke louder. You deserve to live. Finally, Evelyn typed 2 simple sentences. After careful consideration, I had decided to resign from my position at Hanmin Global. Thank you for the opportunities during the past 7 years. She read the message once, then twice. Her finger hovered over the send button. 7 years of loyalty, balanced on a single click. Her heart raced. Then she pressed it. The email disappeared into cyberspace. Just like that. It was over. Evelyn slowly packed the few personal items from her desk. A small photo of her mother. A worn notebook. A coffee mug she had used for years. The office lights flickered softly as she walked toward the elevator. For the first time in 7 years, she didn't feel trapped inside the building. Outside, the rain had stopped. The cool night air touched her face as she stepped onto the quiet street. Evelyn took a deep breath. She felt terrified, but also strangely free. What she didn't know was that somewhere across the city, in a luxurious penthouse office high above Seoul, a billionaire CEO had just opened her resignation email. And it shocked him more than anything had in years. High above the glowing skyline of Seoul, the top floor of Hanmin Global Tower was silent. The executive penthouse office belonged to the company's founder and CEO, Kim Do-Yoon. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows stretched across the entire room, revealing the endless city lights below like a sea of gold and silver. Most nights, the office remained empty. Kim Do-Yoon was rarely in Seoul. He spent most of his time traveling between New York, Tokyo, and Singapore, negotiating billion-dollar deals and expanding the empire he had built from nothing. But tonight, he was here. Standing beside the window, dressed in a tailored black suit, his posture calm and confident. In one hand, he held a tablet displaying the company's internal report system. Numbers, graphs, performance data. To most people, it would have looked overwhelming. To him, it was simply information. Do-Yoon had built his reputation as a man who could read a company's heartbeat through data alone. Which was exactly why something unusual had caught his attention. His assistant, Ji-Hai, stood quietly nearby with a tablet of her own. Sir, the quarterly projections from the Tokyo branch have arrived, she said. But Do-Yoon didn't respond. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. Ji-Hai noticed the silence and frowned slightly. It was rare for her boss to become distracted. What is it, sir? She asked carefully. Do-Yoon slowly scrolled down the screen. Then he spoke one sentence. Who is Evelyn Park? Ji-Hai blinked. She had not expected that question. Evelyn Park, she repeated. Yes. Do-Yoon turned the tablet toward her. Displayed on the screen was a simple resignation email. Short, polite, final. Ji-Hai quickly scanned the message. Oh, she said softly. She works in the operations department. Worked, Do-Yoon corrected. His voice was calm, but there was something sharp beneath it. She resigned 20 minutes ago. Ji-Hai hesitated. Would you like HR to process it immediately? Instead of answering, Do-Yoon opened another document. An internal performance archive. He typed the name again. Evelyn Park. Hundreds of entries appeared. Late-night crisis reports. Emergency logistics corrections. Client recovery operations. The more he scrolled, the deeper the silence in the room became. Ji-Hai slowly realized something. Her boss wasn't just reading the reports. He was studying them, analyzing, connecting patterns. Finally, Do-Yoon leaned back in his chair. His eyes darkened slightly. Interesting. Ji-Hai waited. When Kim Do-Yoon said something was interesting, it usually meant something was very wrong. He tapped one report. March. 3 years ago. A shipment failure from the Busan port. Ji-Hai nodded. That crisis cost the company nearly $10 million. Do-Yoon shook his head. No. He zoomed in on a section of the report. It would have cost us $10 million if this correction hadn't been made. The correction was signed by Evelyn Park. He opened another report. 2 years ago. Client withdrawal risk from our Singapore contract. Ji-Hai recognized the incident. That almost ended our expansion in Southeast Asia. Do-Yoon turned the screen toward her again. And who prevented it? She looked closely. Evelyn Park. Another report. Another crisis. Another quiet correction. All with the same name. For the next few minutes, Do-Yoon said nothing. But the expression on his face slowly changed. Not anger. Not frustration. Something else. Respect. Finally, he spoke again. She solved at least 12 major operational disasters. Ji-Hai nodded slowly. That appears correct. And yet, Do-Yoon continued. His fingers moved across the screen again. Opening another file. Payroll. The number that appeared made his expression turn cold. Her salary was barely higher than an entry-level employee. He looked at Ji-Hai. Explain this. She hesitated. That would be determined by her department manager. Do-Yoon's voice became quieter. Dangerously quiet. She prevented millions in losses. Yes, sir. She worked here for 7 years. Yes. And she was paid this. Ji-Hai had no answer. For the first time that evening, genuine irritation flashed across the CEO's face. Not toward Evelyn. Toward the company itself. How had someone so essential remained invisible for so long? Then he remembered something. Over the past few years, a particular name had repeatedly appeared in internal reports. A quiet employee who worked late. Fixed problems without complaint. Never asked for recognition. At the time, Do-Yoon had simply admired the efficiency. But he had never investigated further. Until tonight. Until the resignation email appeared. He read the message again. 2 sentences. 7 years of loyalty reduced to a polite goodbye. Something about it felt wrong. People who felt valued did not leave like this. They did not walk away quietly. They stayed. Which meant Evelyn Park had left because she believed she didn't matter. The thought irritated him more than he expected. He stood up suddenly. Ji-Hai straightened immediately. Sir. Do-Yoon walked toward the window. The city lights reflected in his sharp eyes. She solved problems that executives failed to notice. Yes. And now she's gone. Yes, sir. A long silence followed. Then Do-Yoon made a decision. He turned back toward his assistant. Prepare the car. Ji-Hai blinked. Sir, it's almost midnight. I'm aware. Where should the driver take you? Do-Yoon picked up his coat from the chair. His voice was calm again. But there was something determined in it. Find her address. Ji-Hai's eyes widened. You're going to visit her personally? Yes. Should I notify HR or her department manager? No. He paused briefly. This isn't an HR issue. Then he walked toward the elevator. Ji-Hai hurried behind him. As the doors opened, she asked one final question. Sir, may I ask why you're doing this? Do-Yoon stepped inside the elevator. For a moment, he considered the question. Then he answered honestly. Because if someone that valuable leaves my company without me even noticing. The elevator doors began closing. Then I'm not running my company as well as I thought. The doors shut. And moments later, a black luxury car pulled away from the tower. Driving toward a quiet apartment across the city. Toward a woman who believed she had just become free. What Evelyn didn't know yet was that her resignation had just caught the attention of one of the most powerful men in Korea. And he was on his way to her door. For the first time in 7 years, Evelyn Park woke up without the sound of her alarm. Morning sunlight slowly slipped through the thin curtains of her small apartment, painting soft golden lines across the walls. Usually, by this hour, she would already be rushing through the crowded subway on her way to the office. But today, the room was quiet. No emails. No deadlines. No urgent phone calls. Evelyn opened her eyes slowly, staring at the ceiling as confusion settled over her. For a brief moment, panic rushed through her chest. She sat up suddenly. Oh no, I'm late. Her hand reached for her phone on the nightstand. 8:47 a.m. Her heart pounded. She had never been late in 7 years. Then the memory returned. The resignation email. The quiet walk out of the building. The rain. And the strange sense of freedom she had felt. Evelyn exhaled slowly and fell back onto the pillow. I really quit, she whispered to herself. The words felt unreal. Part of her expected her phone to ring any second with an angry call from her manager. But the phone remained silent. No messages. No emergencies. No desperate co-workers asking her to fix another problem. Just silence. For the first time in years, Evelyn allowed herself to lie in bed without rushing. But instead of comfort, the silence felt unfamiliar. Almost uncomfortable. Work had been her entire life for so long that she didn't know what to do without it. After a while, she finally got up and walked to the small kitchen. She brewed a cup of coffee, something she usually drank while reviewing reports on her laptop. But today, she sat by the window instead. Outside, the streets of Seoul were alive with morning energy. People hurried to work. Cars filled the intersections. Delivery trucks moved through traffic. Evelyn watched quietly. That used to be her world. Now she was standing outside of it. A strange mixture of emotions settled inside her chest. Relief. Fear. Uncertainty. She took a slow sip of coffee. What do I do now? She murmured. Her savings weren't much. Enough for a few months if she lived carefully. But medical bills for her mother would still come. Reality quickly replaced the brief excitement of quitting. Still, something inside her refused to regret the decision. After breakfast, Evelyn decided to clean her apartment. It was something she rarely had time to do properly. Old documents from work were stacked on her desk. Some dated back years. She laughed softly while throwing them into a box. I really did bring work home every night. 7 years of her life were buried inside those papers. Reports. Plans. Emergency notes. Proof of countless late nights. By the afternoon, the apartment felt lighter. And strangely, so did she. For the first time in years, Evelyn decided to go outside without a destination. No office building. No deadlines. Just a walk. The nearby park was filled with soft spring air. Cherry blossoms drifted gently through the sky like pink snow. Evelyn slowed her steps as she walked beneath the trees. She noticed things she hadn't seen in years. Children running across the grass. An elderly couple feeding pigeons. A young couple sitting together on a bench, laughing softly. Life had been happening all around her, while she had been locked inside an office. A small smile touched her lips. Maybe quitting wasn't the worst decision after all. Her phone buzzed suddenly. The sound startled her. For a moment she considered ignoring it. But curiosity won. She pulled the phone from her pocket. Several messages had arrived from coworkers. Her heart tightened slightly as she opened them. Minute J. Did you seriously quit? The office is a disaster today. Hannah. Your manager is freaking out. No one knows how to finish the shipment report. Jisoo. You really left us behind like that. Evelyn stared at the screen quietly. Part of her had secretly hoped for something else. Maybe someone saying they missed her. Maybe someone asking her to come back. But the messages weren't about her. They were about the work. The problem she used to fix. She sighed softly and slipped the phone back into her pocket. So that's all I was to them, she murmured. A problem solver. Not a person. The realization hurt more than she expected. By evening, the sky began turning orange as the sun slowly sank behind the city skyline. Evelyn returned to her apartment feeling both peaceful and uneasy. The quiet space welcomed her back. She cooked a simple dinner, ramen with vegetables. Usually, she ate dinner at her desk while finishing reports. Tonight, she sat at the small kitchen table instead. But halfway through the meal, doubt began creeping into her mind. Had she made a mistake? Jobs weren't easy to find. Especially good ones. What if she couldn't find another position? What if she had just ruined her future? Evelyn leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. Maybe quitting had been impulsive. Maybe she should have waited. Maybe. Knock. Knock. The sudden sound made her freeze. She frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her neighbors usually kept to themselves. Another knock came. Slightly firmer this time. Evelyn stood slowly and walked toward the door. Her heart beat faster for reasons she couldn't explain. When she opened the door, the world seemed to pause. Standing in the hallway was a tall man dressed in a dark coat. His posture calm, his expression unreadable. But his face was instantly recognizable. She had seen it only once before. On the company website. The powerful CEO of Hanmin Global. The billionaire founder. Kim Do-Yoon. Evelyn's mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. The last person she expected to appear at her tiny apartment was standing right outside her door. And he was looking directly at her. As if he had come there for only one reason. Evelyn stood frozen at the doorway. For a moment, her brain refused to process what her eyes were seeing. Standing in the dimly lit hallway of her small apartment building was the last person she ever expected to see. Kim Do-Yoon, the billionaire CEO of Hanmin Global. The man whose name was spoken with awe inside the company. The man she had never met in person. The man who probably didn't even know she existed. Yet here he was, right outside her door. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed in a dark coat that looked far too expensive for the worn hallway around him. His sharp features were calm, but his eyes held an intensity that made Evelyn suddenly aware of how messy her hair probably looked. She blinked. Once. Then twice. Finally, she managed to speak. Mr. Kim. Her voice sounded smaller than she intended. Do-Yoon gave a slight nod. Yes. His voice was deep and controlled, exactly the way she had imagined from corporate meeting recordings. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The quiet hallway seemed to stretch endlessly between them. Evelyn's mind raced with 1,000 possibilities. Did something happen at the company? Was she in trouble? Did she make a mistake in one of the reports? Or worse, was her resignation rejected? Finally, she cleared her throat nervously. Is something wrong? Do-Yoon studied her carefully. Up close, she looked different from the employee profile photo he had seen earlier. Her hair was loosely tied back. She wore simple home clothes. Her apartment behind her looked small but tidy. She looked real. And very tired. The exhaustion in her eyes told a story he had only partially understood through reports and data. You resigned, he said simply. Evelyn nodded slowly. Yes. The word hung in the air between them. Do-Yoon tilted his head slightly. May I come in? Evelyn's eyes widened in surprise. Her brain scrambled to react. The CEO of a billion-dollar company was asking to enter her tiny apartment. She stepped aside quickly. Of course. Yes. Do-Yoon stepped inside calmly. His presence instantly filled the small space. The apartment suddenly felt much smaller than usual. Evelyn closed the door behind him, still trying to gather her thoughts. This is unexpected, she admitted. Do-Yoon looked around briefly. The apartment was simple. A small couch. A narrow kitchen table. A desk covered with organized documents. But everything was clean and carefully arranged. The space reflected the kind of discipline he had seen in her work. He turned back toward her. Why did you resign? The question came without accusation. Just quiet curiosity. Evelyn hesitated. She hadn't expected to explain herself to anyone, especially not the CEO. I was tired, she said finally. Do-Yoon watched her closely. Tired? Evelyn let out a soft laugh. The sound carried more exhaustion than humor. Yes. She crossed her arms loosely. 7 years is a long time to feel invisible. The honesty surprised him. Most employees would have given a professional explanation. But Evelyn simply told the truth. I worked hard, she continued quietly. I stayed late. Fixed problems. Helped every team that asked. Her voice softened. But eventually I realized something. Do-Yoon waited. Evelyn looked directly at him. The company didn't even know I existed. The words were not angry. Just tired. Do-Yoon felt something tighten in his chest. I knew, he said. Evelyn blinked. You, what? I knew about your work. She stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. He walked toward the small desk and picked up a folder filled with old reports. You solved 12 major operational crises in the past 3 years. Her eyes widened. How do you know that? I read the reports. You read my reports. All of them. For a moment Evelyn could only stare at him. The idea seemed absurd. You're the CEO of a multinational company, she said slowly. Why would you read reports written by a mid-level employee? Do-Yoon answered without hesitation. Because they were always correct. The simple statement caught her off guard. He continued. You fix problems executives failed to notice. Her voice softened slightly. No one ever said that. They should have. A quiet tension filled the room. For the first time since he arrived, Evelyn noticed something unexpected about him. He didn't look arrogant. He looked sincere. Still, confusion lingered. If you knew about my work, she asked carefully, why didn't anything change? Do-Yoon didn't answer immediately. The silence between them carried weight. Finally, he spoke. That's why I'm here. Evelyn frowned slightly. What do you mean? He looked directly into her eyes. I came to ask you to come back. The words hit her like a sudden gust of wind. Come back. Yes. Evelyn shook her head instinctively. You drove across the city to ask me to return to work. Yes. She stared at him, completely stunned. Why? Do-Yoon's voice remained calm. Because losing you would be a mistake. The sincerity in his tone made Evelyn's heart skip unexpectedly. But she quickly regained her composure. I appreciate the gesture, she said gently. But I don't think you understand. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Help me understand. Evelyn sighed softly. I didn't quit because I wanted a raise. She gestured toward the door. I quit because I gave 7 years of my life to a place that never saw me. Her eyes held quiet determination now. And I'm not sure going back would change that. For a moment, the room fell silent again. Do-Yoon studied her with new respect. Most employees would have accepted the invitation immediately. But Evelyn Park wasn't most employees. Finally, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a sealed folder on the table. Then perhaps this will change your mind. Evelyn looked at the folder curiously. What is it? Do-Yoon's answer was calm. A new offer. She slowly opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she read the first line. Director of Global Operations. Her heart began racing. Then she looked up at him in shock. You're serious? His expression didn't change. Very. But the biggest surprise wasn't the position, or the salary written on the second page. It was the quiet determination in his eyes. As if bringing her back wasn't just business. It was personal. Evelyn stared down at the open folder on her kitchen table. For several seconds, the words on the page didn't feel real. Director of Global Operations. Her eyes moved slowly to the next line. The salary number beneath the title made her breath catch. It was more than 3 times what she had been earning before. For 7 years she had struggled to pay rent and medical bills. Now this single document could change everything. But strangely, her first reaction wasn't excitement. It was disbelief. She slowly lifted her eyes to look at Kim Do-Yoon. You're serious? She asked quietly. Do-Yoon stood across from her, his posture calm and confident as always. Yes. Evelyn shook her head slightly. This doesn't make sense. What part of it? He asked. All of it, she replied. She gestured to the contract. You barely know me. And suddenly you're offering me one of the highest leadership positions in the company. Do-Yoon didn't hesitate. I know your work. That's not the same as knowing me. His gaze softened slightly. Then help me understand you. Evelyn looked down again at the contract. For a moment, the silence between them grew heavy. This offer could solve so many problems in her life. Her mother's hospital bills. Her constant financial stress. Her uncertain future. Yet something inside her resisted the idea of accepting too easily. She closed the folder slowly. I can't. Do-Yoon's eyebrow lifted slightly. You can't, or you won't. Evelyn met his eyes. Both. The answer surprised him. Most employees would have accepted the offer immediately. But Evelyn Park had just turned down a position people fought years to obtain. Why? He asked calmly. Evelyn walked toward the window and folded her arms, staring out at the quiet street below. Her voice was soft when she spoke again. Because if I come back, nothing will change. Do-Yoon stepped closer, listening carefully. For 7 years, I gave everything I had to that company. Her eyes reflected distant memories. Late nights. Missed holidays. Endless overtime. She laughed softly, though there was no humor in the sound. I miss my own birthday twice because of work deadlines. Do-Yoon frowned slightly. Evelyn continued. I watched people get promoted over me, people who did half the work. Her voice trembled just a little. And the whole time, I kept telling myself that eventually someone would notice. She turned toward him. But no one did. The quiet honesty in her words filled the room. For the first time since arriving, Kim Do-Yoon looked genuinely troubled. Evelyn continued. So if I go back now, what does that mean? She gestured toward the folder. That the only way to be seen is to quit first. Do-Yoon didn't immediately respond. Because the truth was uncomfortable. She wasn't wrong. Finally he spoke. You're right. The admission surprised her. I should have noticed sooner. Evelyn blinked. She hadn't expected an apology from a billionaire CEO. But Do-Yoon wasn't finished. I built Hanmin Global from nothing, he said quietly. But somewhere along the way, I started trusting the system too much. He looked down briefly at the contract on the table. And the system failed you. For a moment, Evelyn didn't know what to say. His honesty felt disarming. Do-Yoon stepped closer. I'm not offering you this position because you resigned. He looked directly into her eyes. I'm offering it because you already earned it. The sincerity in his voice made her heart beat faster. But she still hesitated. What if I say no? She asked softly. Do-Yoon didn't hesitate. Then I'll respect your decision. The calm confidence in his response surprised her again. No pressure, she asked. None. She studied him carefully. You drove across the city personally to ask me to return. Yes. And you're willing to walk away if I refuse. He nodded once. Your choice should be yours. The room fell quiet again. Evelyn realized something strange. This conversation no longer felt like an employer negotiating with an employee. It felt more personal. Do-Yoon seemed to sense the shift as well. He leaned slightly against the table. There is one more reason I came personally, he said. Evelyn tilted her head. What reason? His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. I wanted to see the person behind the reports. Her heart skipped slightly. And, she asked. His expression softened faintly. I'm glad I did. The simple statement carried unexpected warmth. Evelyn quickly looked away, suddenly aware of the quiet tension in the room. Even if I accept, she said carefully, I wouldn't want my life to become what it was before. It won't. How can you guarantee that? Do-Yoon answered simply. Because this time, you won't be invisible. His voice lowered slightly. And neither will I. She looked back at him. The meaning behind those words felt deeper than business. Something new was beginning to grow between them. Neither of them said it out loud. But both could feel it. Evelyn looked down once more at the contract on the table. Her future rested inside those pages. But this time, the decision wasn't just about work. It was about the life she wanted to build next. And perhaps, about the man standing quietly in her kitchen, watching her with calm patience, waiting for her answer. The quiet in Evelyn's apartment felt different now. No longer awkward. Just heavy with unspoken thoughts. The contract still lay on the table between them, untouched since she closed it moments earlier. Evelyn leaned lightly against the kitchen counter, watching the man who had completely disrupted the calm of her evening. Kim Do-Yoon stood near the table, his tall frame relaxed but his eyes thoughtful. For a billionaire CEO known for decisive actions, he seemed unusually patient tonight. Waiting. Not for a business deal. But for her. Evelyn folded her arms loosely. There's something I still don't understand, she said. Do-Yoon looked up. What is it? She studied him carefully before speaking. You could have sent someone else. He tilted his head slightly. Someone else? Yes, she replied. HR could have called me. My department manager could have arranged a meeting. She gestured around the apartment. But instead, the CEO of Hanmin Global personally drove across the city to knock on the door of a former employee's tiny apartment. Her voice softened. Why? Do-Yoon didn't answer immediately. For a moment, his gaze drifted toward the window where the distant city lights flickered against the dark sky. It was a simple question. But the answer wasn't simple. Finally, he spoke. Because some conversations shouldn't be handled by intermediaries. Evelyn raised an eyebrow slightly. That sounds like a very careful answer. He allowed a faint smile. It's also the honest one. She waited. But she could sense there was more. After a brief silence, Do-Yoon stepped closer to the table and rested his hand lightly on the back of a chair. You asked earlier how I knew about your work. Evelyn nodded. Yes. He looked directly at her. The truth is, I noticed you years ago. Her eyes widened slightly. Years. Yes. Evelyn frowned, trying to remember. But we've never met before. That's true, he said. But I read almost every operational crisis report that reaches the executive level. He gestured toward the desk where her documents were stacked neatly. And your name kept appearing. Evelyn listened quietly. At first, he continued, I thought it was coincidence. He paused briefly. But then I realized something. What? She asked softly. You were always the one fixing problems after everyone else had failed. The words hung in the air between them. You worked late. You corrected mistakes that managers overlooked. You solved situations that could have cost the company millions. His voice remained calm, but his respect was unmistakable. Eventually, I started recognizing your name before even opening the reports. Evelyn blinked, clearly surprised. You're saying, you were paying attention to me? Yes. But if that's true, she said slowly, why didn't you ever say anything? Do-Yoon looked down briefly, as if considering the question carefully. Because I believed the system would reward you eventually. His voice carried quiet regret. I assumed your department leadership would recognize your contributions. Evelyn sighed softly. Well, they didn't. No, he admitted. And that was my mistake. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn asked the question that had been lingering in her mind. So when you saw my resignation tonight? He finished the sentence for her. I realized the system had already failed. Her gaze softened slightly. And that bothered you? Yes. But not only because of the company. Evelyn tilted her head. What do you mean? Do-Yoon hesitated for the first time since arriving. It was subtle, but she noticed. Finally he spoke again. Because I realized something else. What? That someone who worked that hard must have sacrificed a lot to do it. His eyes moved briefly around the apartment. The small kitchen. The modest furniture. The organized desk filled with work documents. You gave 7 years of your life to the company, he said quietly. And I never even met you. Evelyn's heart tightened slightly at the sincerity in his voice. For the first time, she saw something different in him. Not just a powerful CEO, but a man reflecting on his own failures. Do-Yoon continued. So tonight, I made a decision. What decision? That if I wanted you to return, I should be the one to ask. The simplicity of the answer surprised her. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. I know. Then why did you? He met her gaze again. And this time, his voice carried a quiet honesty that felt deeper than business. Because people like you don't come around often. Her breath caught slightly. You mean employees? No. The word came out more firmly than expected. He held her gaze. I mean people. The room suddenly felt smaller. Evelyn quickly looked away, pretending to adjust something on the counter. Her heart had begun beating faster. She hadn't expected the conversation to become this personal. After a moment she spoke again. You know, she said, trying to lighten the tension, most CEOs probably wouldn't go this far for one employee. Do-Yoon's expression softened again. That's because most CEOs don't realize who their most valuable employees are until it's too late. She smiled faintly. Well, you arrived just in time then. He stepped slightly closer. Did I? Their eyes met again. The distance between them felt smaller now. Not just physically, but emotionally. Evelyn cleared her throat softly and glanced at the contract on the table. I still haven't decided, she said. I know. You're very patient for someone who runs a billion-dollar company. He smiled faintly. Patience is useful when something important is at stake. Her curiosity returned. And this is important to you? Yes. How important? Do-Yoon paused before answering. His voice lowered slightly. Important enough to knock on your door. Evelyn felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She quickly looked away again, suddenly very aware of the quiet tension filling the room. This evening had started with a simple knock. Now it felt like the beginning of something far more complicated. Something neither of them had expected. And the biggest decision of Evelyn's life still sat quietly on the table between them. Waiting. 3 days passed after Kim Do-Yoon left Evelyn's apartment. 3 quiet days. 3 long days filled with thinking. The contract remained on her kitchen table the entire time. Evelyn had read it at least 10 times. Every detail was clear. The position, the authority, the salary. But the decision wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about what kind of life she wanted moving forward. For 7 years, she had sacrificed everything for work. If she returned to Hanmin Global, things had to be different. On the third morning, Evelyn finally closed the contract folder and exhaled slowly. Her answer was clear. Later that day, a sleek black car stopped in front of Hanmin Global's towering headquarters. Employees walking toward the building barely noticed the woman stepping out of the taxi nearby. Simple coat, neatly tied hair, calm expression. But when she entered the lobby, several employees froze. Wait, isn't that Evelyn? I thought she quit. She did. The whispers spread quickly as she walked through the building. The same building she had quietly walked out of just days earlier. But something felt different now. Her steps were confident. Her shoulders relaxed. She no longer carried the invisible weight she had once felt there. When she reached the operations department, the reaction was even stronger. Her former co-workers stared at her like they had seen a ghost. Minajay nearly dropped his coffee. Evelyn? Hannah rushed toward her. You came back. Jizza blinked in confusion. Wait, did they beg you to return? Evelyn smiled gently. Something like that. Before anyone could ask more questions, the department manager suddenly appeared from his office. His face turned pale when he saw her. Evelyn, I thought you resigned. I did, she said calmly. Then why are you here? Evelyn was about to answer when another voice spoke from behind them. She's here because I asked her to return. The room fell silent instantly. Everyone turned toward the doorway. Standing there was the one person no one expected to see in the operations department. Kim Do-Yoon, the CEO himself. Employees quickly straightened their posture. The department manager looked like he might faint. Sir, I wasn't aware you were visiting today. Do-Yoon stepped into the room calmly. His gaze briefly met Evelyn's before turning to the rest of the team. I came to introduce someone. The tension in the room thickened. Evelyn stood quietly beside him. Then Do-Yoon spoke the words that changed everything. Effective immediately, Evelyn Park will be taking the position of Director of Global Operations. The entire department went silent. Someone dropped a pen. Minajay's mouth literally fell open. Director? The department manager's face turned pale. Sir, are you serious? Do-Yoon's expression remained calm. Very. He continued. Miss Park has been responsible for preventing multiple operational disasters over the past several years. His voice carried quiet authority. Her work has saved this company millions. Evelyn felt dozens of shocked eyes staring at her. For 7 years, she had worked quietly behind the scenes. Now everyone was finally hearing the truth. Do-Yoon finished his announcement. And from today forward, she will be overseeing global operations across all departments. The room erupted into murmurs. Some shocked. Some impressed. Some embarrassed for not realizing her value sooner. But Evelyn felt something much deeper. Closure. 7 years of silent effort had finally been acknowledged. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Employees slowly returned to their desks, still whispering about the shocking promotion. Evelyn stepped into her new office for the first time. The space was large and bright, with wide windows overlooking the entire city. It was bigger than her entire apartment. She walked slowly toward the window. For a moment, she simply stood there, absorbing the view. Then a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. Do you like it? She turned to see Kim Do-Yoon leaning casually against the frame. Yes, she admitted. It's beautiful. He stepped inside. I thought you might appreciate a better view after spending 7 years under fluorescent lights. Evelyn laughed softly. That's definitely an improvement. They stood quietly for a moment. Then she turned toward him again. You didn't have to make such a dramatic announcement. Do-Yoon raised an eyebrow. I did. Why? Because everyone needed to understand something. And what's that? He met her gaze calmly. That talent should never be invisible. Her heart warmed slightly at his words. Thank you, she said softly. For believing in me. Do-Yoon shook his head. You earned this long before I offered it. A brief silence followed. Then Evelyn crossed her arms playfully. You know, if I hadn't quit, none of this would have happened. That's true. So maybe quitting was the best decision I ever made. Do-Yoon smiled faintly. Not quite. She tilted her head. Oh. He stepped a little closer. The best decision you made was opening the door. Her heart skipped. Evelyn tried to hide her smile. Well, I almost didn't. I'm glad you did. Outside the window, the city of Seoul stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Inside the office, two people who had once been strangers stood quietly together. A hardworking woman who had spent years feeling invisible. And the billionaire CEO who had finally noticed her. Their professional partnership was just beginning. But both of them sensed something more slowly unfolding beneath the surface. Something unexpected. Something neither of them had planned. A new future. And this time, Evelyn Park wasn't just surviving anymore. She was finally living.